Thank you so much for coming. I see a lot of old friends of Vinayak and Rumjhum, and some new friends from Habitat. This, as you know, is the first of a monthly series that we're starting with India Habitat Center. Thank you to Suneet and Vidyun for making this happen. And thank you to Vinayak and Rumchum for allowing us to put something like this together. And of course, our first guest, Devdutt Pattanaik. It's such a pleasure to have you you'll talk about infrastructure and Vinayak will talk about mythology, right? So let's see how that happens. Thank you so much again. And I'd like to invite Suneet Tandon to sort of set us off. And thank you again.
Yeah. Exchanging hats is always a good idea. Good evening. Thank you so much, Kaveri, for setting the ball rolling on this evening's flow. I am absolutely delighted with what we are starting out with today. This came from a very brief conversation with Rumjhum, saying, can we do something together with the India Habitat Center? We're doing this wonderful InfraVision Foundation. We're doing so much of activity around infrastructure and awareness and so on. So something which involves the general public. I said, we'd be delighted to, obviously. And so I put her in touch with Vidyun, and there was a conversation that took place, and very swiftly, in short order, the whole series was planned and ready. I mean, it was really miraculous record time that it was worked out in. And then, of course, came, which is going to be the first conversation, and then you sprang this wonderful name upon us, that it'll be Devdutt Pattanaik in conversation with Vinayak Chatterjee. I said, how marvelous is that? Thank you so much for setting the ball rolling. I think I'm going to ask you both to come on stage and take your places. They are marked duly. Welcome to India Habitat Center. Thank you so much. Thanks, Vinayak. Vinayak and I, of course, go back many, many years to college as well. And so I'm supposed to do the formal introduction, but as both of them are so well known, I'm going to just confine it to a few lines to complete the formalities, so to speak. Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik, of course, is the author of more than 50 books and over 1,000 columns with bestsellers such as My Gita, Jaya, Sita, Sham, Business Sutra, and 7 Secret series. He's a regular columnist. He writes for reputed newspapers like the Times of India and Dainik Bhaskar. He's known for his TED Talks and his shows on television. His TV shows include Business Sutra on CNBC TV 18, Dev Lok on Epic TV, and Dance Sthapna on Sony Live. He lectures on the relevance of both Indian and Western myths in modern life. He has a lot of radio shows, podcasts, etc., etc. But something that I learned from this, and which I didn't know about you, was that he actually trained in medicine and spent 15 years working in the pharma and healthcare industry. But over the past decade, naturally, given his productivity in the world of words, he has been truly, fully immersed in exploring mythology and sharing its wisdom with the world. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Devdutt Pattanaik. Thank you. And Vinayak Chatterjee is a wonderful old friend of mine from college days. He's the founder and managing trustee of the InfraVision Foundation, which is collaborating with us on this monthly series. So please look forward to it in your calendars every month. And he did his economics honors from St. Stephen's College, as did I. But then he went on to a much more brilliant career than me. And MBA from the IIM Ahmedabad, and co-founded Feedback Infra Private Limited in 1990, served as its chairman from 90 to 2021. He's stepped down from active management, but devotes his time and energy to infrastructure policy and advocacy. I'm just going to very briefly say that in 1988, the World Economic Forum at Davos recognized him as one of the 100 global leaders of tomorrow. Vinayak?
Tomorrow. It's always been tomorrow.
It'll always be tomorrow. Wonderful. In 2011, the Indian Institute of Management Ahmedabad conferred on him the Distinguished Alumnus Award. That was yesterday. He is currently the chairman of the Confederation of Indian Industries, CII's National Council on Infrastructure, and has chaired various infrastructure and economic committees at the national level of CII since 2001. He is a very well-read columnist, a monthly column on infrastructure for Business Standard, including Infra Talk. It's called Infra Talk. And he has authored a book titled Getting It Right, India's Unfolding Infrastructure Agenda, published in 2011. This is just a skim through his very vast CV and very distinguished CV. So I'm now going to leave the stage and let these two very distinguished persons have a conversation, after which they've promised to let you ask a few questions. And hopefully this will be one of the most enlightening conversations ever taking place in this particular hall. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Sunit. For a change, I'm going to sit and talk, and thank you for that lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be in your kingdom, the India Habitat Center. Yeah. And as Sunit said, we go back a long way, 1976, in college together, and he was, at that time, he was shining in terms of his love and passion for music, which has not gone away. It has not gone away, and he was then, I remember, the head of the College Music Society, and which gave me an idea that one of the future talks, like it's infrastructure and mythology, it could be infrastructure and music. For example, PMGSY, Country Roads Take Me Home. Huh? GMR, International Airport, right? And similar stuff. You could weave something together, and we'll have a session called Music and Infrastructure. All the songs we know, both from Hindi music and English, which have that theme. So thank you very much. So I'm planting the thought in you. We could have a music and infra where you are going to be sitting here and we shall be moderating that. So I'm now going to kick off the session with this, my newfound friend, whom I've read and seen but never met physically, other than today. So I'm saying newfound friend physically. Thank you very much for being in our midst. And I'm going to kickstart the discussion this evening by asking Devdutt some personal questions. Let's first get to know him as a man. We'll figure out infrastructure and mythology in the course of the evening. Now, your name, Devdutt, is quite coincidental or otherwise with the topic in which you have shown. Did your parents, with your surname, you could have been named Naveen or Biju or, any or maybe even Pandian in today's world, we don't know. But did they say that this little boy of ours is going to somewhere on that track, and they named, they could have named you Sanjay, Rajiv, anything. But Devdutt, do you think there was some logic in their minds?
No, so I was born on Datta Jayanti. So Datta Jayanti in December. So my mother was in Maharashtra, and Datta is a very big god in Bombay side. So Devdutt is a name she had in her head for a long time. She liked the name very much. And of course Devdutt is Buddha's evil cousin.
Evil cousin.
His antagonist. And Devdutt is also the conch shell of Arjun. Arjun ka jo shankh hota hai.
So your mother and father knew all this?
No, this I told them later.
But they named you before that. They named you before that.
They named me because of Datta Jayanti. So then I was wondering why this strange name was given to me. And then I sort of, over the years, I got one meaning, then another meaning, and then third meaning. And over time, the meanings build up.
It all added up. My compliments to they're around, your dad and mom?
No.
Anyway, if there were, one could have passed on a compliments to them to saying what vision in terms of giving the boy a name.
My parents were, I think, after doing medicine, when you start doing Ramayana and Mahabharata, so they said, "Paise kaise kamaoge?" Because you have a medical degree in MBBS, and I'm saying, I don't want to be a doctor. And I'm spending all the time doing Ramayana and Mahabharata. So you can imagine my father's post-retirement, and he's like, will you be a clerk somewhere? What will you do? How will you earn a living? Because you're not doing a medical thing. So it was, and then I bought a house in Bombay with Ramayana and Mahabharata. And I think it proved to be quite lucrative.
It is. So now, therefore, just tell us a little bit about yourself. So as Sunit said in his introduction, you finished a doctor, you're an MBBS, you're a doctor, you've worked in the healthcare sector, you are a professional like any one of us, and you chose this path less trodden to focus and shine and enjoy yourself in this world of Indian mythology. As a young man, when did the transition take place? Or even when you were a child, when you were playing Sat Pittu and Gulli Danda, did you say, "Okay, I'm going to become a mythologist," you know? When did it hit you?
So,
Thank you, Aman. This is an old hotelier's eye, you know. Come.
no, so I'll also move this a little. No, mythology was a hobby, something that I did in my free time. It was
From when? From what age?
during my internship, I think, when I was doing medicine, and I knew that I didn't want to follow this profession, and this was my escape zone. So I would spend my time reading books on. I didn't call it mythology at that time. Today I use the word mythology very deliberately and specifically, but at that time I was drawn to these books like the Ramayana, Mahabharata, more academic books. And it was something that I did as a reading. When I go to a bookshop, you would go to the culture section, pick up these books. Kamala Subramaniam's book from Bharati Vidya Bhavan, all this kind of stuff.
But that's what's made you different, no? Because we would be picking up some two-penny romances, you know.
I also picked up two penny romances. In fact, I used to secretly read my sister's Mills and Boon. And I was told boys are not supposed to read those books. So we've done all that. Because I would always wonder why they giggle at night. And so I've done that, and I did this as completely as a hobby. It was not something. Some people collect stamps. This was what I enjoyed doing. I love fantasy art books, so I would buy fantasy art books, and that's why I illustrate all my work. But I never thought this would become a profession. This was something that is my escape space, where you go to sort of relax and calm down. I was like, okay, I've done my medicine. I don't want to practice medicine. What do I do? So I went into medical communication. And it was something that I did in medical communication. I had this strange business card which says, at one time, called Medical Communicator and Mythologist.
Oh, wow. That was really confused the
And
hell out of anybody.
and I thought it was perfectly natural to give this
No, it
business
wasn't.
card. And my friend, who's a journalist, said, "Are you sure people take you seriously after this?"
Yeah. They wouldn't.
And he's the one who got me the column in Corporate Dossier. So I didn't think it was strange to have a day job which was medicine and pharma industry. So I entered the pharma industry, and I was earning my living from my pharma industry and the hospital industry. So I worked in Apollo Health Street. I worked for a long time in the pharma industry. And I was good at business. I was not in the medical side. I was in the business side and the training side. And eventually I was managing, lots of things. So, but that's something which came to me intuitively. I was very good at managing business. But in my free time, I would study mythology. And it was something that I did for fun. And then I met a friend who had a magazine, and I would write columns for him sometime, because I've always been a magazine secretary in college. But I never took it seriously until, I met this gentleman, and he said, "I don't know anything about Shiva. Will you write a book on Shiva?" So, and I didn't realize it at that time. Today I realize it. I just sent him a table of content immediately. And he said, "How did you do it so fast?" I said, "Isn't this the most logical way to do it?" And this is because of my medical background. You study in medicine, you have to study such a vast subject. You have a system. And I applied the same system to mythology very casually, without thinking too much. And he was very impressed. I didn't think it was impressive. I thought this was the most logical and rational thing to do. But he said, no, you publish it. And I published my book in 1996. I thought it would be like this bestseller, and it'll make millions of rupees. And I got a grand paycheck of 500 rupees at the end of it.
That's quite a bit still, huh?
Yeah, but at that time I felt that, I'm not going to be Salman Rushdie. and I was so I have to continue working in the pharma industry and make my money. And that's what I did. And then I think one thing led to another, and it's only in my work that I realized I would always solve problems by telling stories from mythology. And I think that I would do it very casually and very naturally. And I started talking, and my friends who were journalists said that, do you realize what you're doing? I said, well, I would keep giving examples. He said, then why don't you write about it? And I wrote columns on it. And one thing led to another. And that's how the whole thing became bigger than what it was.
Wonderful.
So, and over time that made more money. So I gave up pharma.
Very logical. Thank you. Yes. So any young people here in this room, if you're confused about your life space, please note, mythology is an option. Right. Okay. Now, as we go deeper into the subject for this evening, I'm going to do a small audience test. I'm obviously not everybody in this room, including myself, has read cover to cover of various Fundu books, but mythological or otherwise. But even if you've read Amar Chitra Katha, it's okay. Don't be shy. So anybody would like to just put up their hands and share with Devdutt anything that strikes your mind about a link between mythology and infrastructure? Anybody? Okay. I see 2 hands up. The lady there at the back.
Hello, sir. So my name is Rinda, and the first thing, or rather the first example that comes to my mind when I hear about mythology and infrastructure is the famous Ram Setu Bridge, which was built by Lord Rama and his army to cross Lanka. It was built using natural limestone shoals. And so it is basically an example that showcases how modern engineers could build these environment-friendly bridges. So that is one thing that comes
This is
to
the
my
one that
mind.
monkeys built. Well, we are familiar with that because even today there are many bridges that monkeys have built, including the recent one at Morbi and before that on the Mandovi River. So it's not mythological at all. It's very. But thank you very much. The gentleman there had his hand up.
Clearing the forest for the new capital city of Pandavs, a new township.
In the press.
Cutting the forest. Did they get there was no permission required at that time. Environment and forest clearance, compensatory forest policy, nothing. So he's got that one straight off, huh? And it's a touchy subject even now. I mean, we infrastructure business, cutting trees.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's the same thing.
Okay, that's the one he cut the forest for. The one that you're referring to now.
And then it was very interesting, like, wherever you would see water which was actually the floor, and, that whole thing that led to
Aman, was your hand going up?
We are sitting in Indraprastha virtually. As we speak, as Mr. Dr. Pattanaik speaks.
Yeah. Aman, yes. No, you had. Did I see your hand up? No. I thought there was some mythological stuff between Imrana and. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Yes, please. Sorry.
Dwarka city.
Dwarka. Okay.
Does Pushpak Viman make the cut?
That will be if it was mythology and technology. This
If
is
it was
infrastructure.
It's.
Aviation infrastructure.
Yeah, so now that's the very fine distinction in infrastructure, that an airport is infrastructure but an airline is not. A port is but a ship is not. So he's drawn that very, very technical distinction. Yeah, please. Yes, Bonnie.
The palace made of lac,
Oh,
Laksh, which was set on burn down, right?
so in those days we allowed the Chinese to build, huh?
No, it was built at Chinese speed. From what I remember, it sort of came up pretty quickly.
Gotcha, because today they have to localize. They can, only. Yeah.
Also the Pushkar lake, where Brahma dropped the
Yes,
flower,
the
and
lake,
then,
yes.
it became a lake with 52 corners and all.
Wow, well done. You could be here. So, with this, I think you've got a flavor that the audience is you're on fertile ground. You've got a ready audience waiting to hear you. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, when I heard this topic, I kept wondering about, what does the meaning of infrastructure mean? It's nature doesn't have infrastructure. It's a man-made phenomenon, right? The Prakriti mein, there's no infra. What is the Hindi word for infrastructure?
Parampara Bunyadi Dhache. If you hear DD News, they'll say Bunyadi Dhache. That's Hindi for infrastructure.
Sanrachna is the word which is used.
Which is what?
Sanrachna. So the thing is, nature doesn't have infrastructure in a way. If you think about it, it's just nature's nature. And humans need infrastructure to move from point A to point B. So it is infrastructure that builds civilizations. So if I don't want to meet you, I don't need a road to reach you. And therefore, the fact that when we hear a story like of Ramayana and Ravan has a city which is not connected to the main, he doesn't want an infrastructure. He doesn't want people to come to his land. And he can go, he's elite enough to have a technology that isolates his people from the rest of the world. So bridge and technology is not about the physical idea. It is why are we building a bridge? Why do we need a bridge? It's like human relationships. Why do you need a bridge to connect with someone? That's an important thing to ask ourselves. Why do we need bridges? You don't want bridges to be broken. You build a bridge to connect people. In India, they used to not build bridges. They would have something called tirtha. Tirth it is considered inauspicious to cross rivers. You consider bad luck to cross a river. But a portion of the river is shallow. And therefore you can cross the river because it's a shallow part of the river, what's called a ford. And that's tirtha. That's the original meaning of the word tirtha. Tirtha is that part of the river which is so shallow that you can just cross it and go to the other side. And once you go in India, we don't realize the meaning of this word, because if you cross a river, you go to another culture completely. The world changes. I don't know how many of you all are from UP, but there's something called Sarayu Par Brahman. Sarayu ke par rehne wala Brahman. Here we are talking about Ram Setu connecting Lanka. But you actually have a Brahmin community which separates itself. Kanyakubja Brahman or Sarayu ke par rehne wale Brahman. And many of them won't marry each other because there is no bridge connecting them. So bridge has to be seen at a metaphysical level and at a physical level. But the purpose you build a bridge is to connect people. And if I don't want to be connected with you, I don't want a bridge. Right? And that's, I think, an important thing to remember. Why do we need airports? Why do we need ports? Why do we want to connect? And India has been connected with the world in very strange ways, which we don't talk about. We don't understand this. Our knowledge is restricted to few stories from mythology. And I was telling Vinayak that I would rather expose the audience to the larger narrative of how much stories are there and how do we connect. Because mythology is not just stories. It's concepts like Tirtha Yatra, where you walk from place to place, and if there is no road, how do you build an infrastructure? Like the word, I'll give you an example of the word marg. Marg means path. It comes from mrig, the deer. The deer se pagdandi banta hai, because the deer will always go towards water. So you know that wherever the deer goes, you will find water. So when you're traveling, when we travel, we are looking for the dhaba, right? We are looking for the hotel because you'll stop somewhere to eat something. You can't travel without a hotel. So the sages needed to travel. They would follow the mriga because the mriga will take you to water. And then mriga se marga banta hai. और मार्ग से मार्गी परंपरा आता है. So margi parampara means the highway religion. Because even today when you travel across India, you have highways where you have billboards in English and Hindi. But real India is not next to the highway only. There is a pagdandi out there, like networks, neural networks which open up. And there are many, many, many parts of India where there is no highway. There's barely roads. When I was an intern 20 years ago, I went to villages for the first time, barely 20 kilometers outside Bombay, where to go to the village, you had to cross a puddle and people will be waiting outside with buckets so you can wash your leg. And I'm like, I'm in the 1990s. And there were people where the marg would end and desh would begin. So there is margi parampara and desi parampara. So tirtha, marg, desh, all these words are coming are infrastructure. They're making you think. And how the marga, so when Ram is going, when the Pandavas are going, all the stories, the Ramayana and Mahabharata is a story of a king going to hunt a deer. Mriga ko so Pandu is hunting a deer. Dashrath is looking for a deer. Dushyanta is looking for a deer. And in many ways, he's stopping the journey to the water. And therefore, all bad things happen in a story. In the old days, if you tell the story, once upon a time, king went hunting for a deer, that's a way of saying something terrible is going to happen. Because of marg ruk jayega. And I think these are, I'd rather, these focus on these things, the marga, the desha, the tirtha. How did people pass through mountains in India? How do they cross the mountains and the rivers? Agastya Muni wants to go to the south of India. How does he go to the south of India? He has to cross the Vindhya mountains. Why does he have to go to the south? There are so many stories told why he wants to go to the south. But the point is to go to the south. They say the Vindhya mountains blocks even the sun. You can't cross it. So when he comes there, the Vindhya mountain bows to him. And he says, stay bent so that I can cross. Which means the rishis at one time were always to the north of the Vindhyas. They were never to the south of the Vindhyas. And then they moved to the south of the Vindhyas. And so you have Agastya Marga. And usually it's along the Godavari river. If you see the Godavari river, you'll find Agastya Marga. And you suddenly find a path created by Agastya Muni. If you go towards Karnataka, I'm sorry, most North Indians don't know much about South India, so I'm just exploring a different land. Like a deer, I'm taking you towards southern waters. And then you see another space, and you see this mountain. It's called Krauncha Parvat. Because the mountain was so big that they're told that Kartikeya hurls his spear and the mountain splits so that it makes a path to the south. And of course the mountain is considered to be a demon, Rakshas hai, Surpadam. These are many stories are there, and he figures out this mountain is not really a mountain. It's actually a demon, and he throws his spear and he splits this mountain into two parts. And a Krauncha Pass is created. And this Krauncha Pass, you go to Google and search Krauncha Pass, and you'll find a Krauncha Pass. So you find, and why is Kartikeya going south? Because he has fought with his father in the north, and he wants to make a home for himself to the south. So you have a story connecting the north and the south, the crossing of the mountains, the crossing of the rivers. And they're talking about infrastructure, but using coded language. They're talking about movement through passes, finding river spaces to cross, because nobody built bridges in those days. तो तीर्थ जब तक नहीं होगा, अब जाओगे कैसे आगे? अगर मार्ग नहीं होगा, जाओगे कैसे वहाँ पे? So these passes were created, and then that's how culture evolved in our country. And I thought I should draw my attention to the larger narrative of infrastructure.
And your story on the temples?
And this is how, so, I always wondered when people ask, everybody now does Instagram videos of Kedarnath, Badrinath. But nobody asks, why did those temples, were they built there? And I never really understood why they were built in that place in Uttarakhand. And if you look carefully and you ask historians, and historians know it, but they don't talk about it, is it was a trade route to Tibet. Or Tibet, say, you would get, have you heard of Sonepe Suhaga? What is Suhaga? Any idea? Yes, it's borax. It's a borax, and the only place you get borax is Tibet. Tibet, the whole world's supply of borax, which every goldsmith needs to polish his gold, is in Tibet. Or Tibet, say, there is a path which comes down towards Uttarakhand, and that's the path where you will find Kedarnath, Badrinath.
Very interesting.
Because when you're traveling on these difficult journeys, you get scared. You need a place to rest, you need a place to eat, you're scared चोरी हो जाएगा, आपकी गाड़ी टूट जाएगी, डकैती हो जाएगी, कुछ भी हो सकता है. You're traveling to these faraway places. There is no infrastructure. There is no king providing you a marg. He's not built a highway for you. So you have to figure out your own path, asking people, पगडंडी से कैसे जाए वहाँ पे? सुहागा वहाँ पे है. तो फिर मंदिर बनने लगते हैं. Somebody builds, a Buddhist builds a stup. Somebody builds a vihara, somebody builds a mandir, somebody builds, now gurudwaras are built over there, but they always follow a trade route. So economics, or Khajuraho. So I was telling him stories of like Khajuraho temple. It's a beautiful temple, right? How many of you all have been to Khajuraho? Have you noticed there's no city around it? It's very difficult to get there. Why would someone build a temple which is no longer worshipped? It was an abandoned temple in the middle of nowhere. Because when it was built 1,000 years ago, it was next to the highway. So 1,000 years ago, there was a highway there. it made a lot of money. There were pilgrims, there were traders, there were bankers, people, villages to provide. So there was an employment, there was an economic over there. जब पैसे आते हैं तो वो एक्स्ट्रा पैसा से करे, डर भी लगता है पैसे से, तो 1% दे दिया मंदिर को. So suddenly cash is created. जब कैश क्रिएट हो जाता है तो कैश से हम मंदिर बनाते हैं. तो just to see the temple, you start building these, then you get the artisans coming there. Because that's how you show you're rich. In the old days, to be rich, you have to patronize Saraswati. That's the only indicator of being wealthy. Very different from today. Right? Today you have to get a TRP rating on a social media, and that shows you're rich. But in the old days, you got artists and poets to come to you because you can afford to pay the artist. You can afford to pay. So the wealth, the economics created by the travel would generate extra wealth which enabled. So Lakshmi se Saraswati aati hai. And imagine a craftsman, why would he work over there? Only because he's being paid for it. And therefore the cash generates this beautiful temple called, Khajuraho, with all its carvings. But one day the new king comes, he hates the old king, and he says, change the highway. I want a new highway, 20 degrees east. And the highway dies. Highway dies, it's like a blood vessel dying. That part will gangrene, rot and die. The villages die, people die. When people die, there is no use for a temple. The temple just exists. And the good thing, the bad thing is the temple is abandoned. The good thing is, since it is not rich enough, nobody wants to invade this temple, break this temple, plunder this temple. So we find it, and it's a perfect tourist attraction for the 21st century. But that's how it happens. So mythology allows us to see not just stories, but infrastructure, the building of temples. Why were these temples built? Why were these roads? Why were these pilgrim spots built? Mythology is about the Sthala Purana, the local stories.
So you were making a point when we were having a casual conversation that Indian kings of yore or emperors did not build the palaces that you see in Europe, but they built temples.
Yeah.
What, I mean, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so there is a superstition, a very strong belief, very strong belief. Superstition bolo, belief bolo. Belief is what I believe in, and superstition is what you believe in. So that's how it works. You know, all the people who we don't like have superstitions. Mera vishwas sach hai aur aapka kimvadanti hai. So the belief is that the king's house should always be made of perishable materials. पत्थर से नहीं बनना चाहिए. पत्थर से सिर्फ भगवान का मंदिर बनता है. तो पत्थर से, so they say one of the reasons, one of the local lores is that the Vijayanagar kings were the only kings who built palaces of stone. Nobody else built palaces of stone. They built palaces of wood. They built palaces using organic material. Like the Japanese if you see the Japanese palaces, they're all made of wood. Go to Bhutan, all the palaces are made of wood. You go to Nepal, the palaces are made of wood. So India even if you go to Thiruvananthapuram, the palace is made of wood. They would never, always organic material, always perishable materials. Stone only for God. That was the rule. That was a very strong rule that was maintained. And therefore you don't find the palaces in India. You'll always find temples. The idea also is Raja aayenge, jayenge, Bhagwan nahi jayega. Devata nahi jayega. So the temple is also very important because the height of the temple tells you how prosperous the land. So in the height of the temple and how difficult it is, where it is built indicates how much money you have, because you can invest that kind of money. How far away you can take people, where can you build, दूर से दिखाई देना चाहिए, and जितना दूर उसका spire होगा, उतना that protection of the deity will spread that much. So for example, in the coast of Gujarat, there is, near Gujarat there is a temple known as Sikotra Devi. Sikotra Devi is a temple on top of a mountain, and Vahanavati usko bolte hain. The Vahanavati, the goddess of the boats, and she would sit over there on top. And Sikotra, by the way, is an island near Yemen. So Sikotra Devi was the ships which would come from Yemen and that Persian side along the Makran coast to Gujarat would see the temple, or har sham ko wahan pe drums will be beaten and lamps would be lit, and you'll say, hey, Devi ki puja ho rahi hai, or is it a lighthouse? Or is it a lighthouse? So the idea also is Raja aayenge, jayenge, Bhagwan nahi jayega. Devata nahi jayega. So the Because the ships won't come every time. They'll only come in a particular season of the year when the monsoon is blowing. There's only this much window in which ships will come, and there's only this much window when the ships will go. So वहाँ जब ships आएंगे वहाँ पे देवी का जात्रा होगा. So there will be a mela. People will come from the villages getting all their goods for the goddess. And it will be an emporium. People will sing and dance and play, and there will be beads being sold, metal being sold, fabric being sold, all kinds of things being sold. And ships come from faraway lands, and they exchange goods and they stay together in tents for several months. And then the winds change and the ship goes away. The mela ends, everybody goes away. There is no trace of the city, like what happens during Kumbh Mela. Millions come, millions go away. There is no sign of a port. There is no infrastructure. But yet people come, people go, people do things. The goddess enables them to bring together. Which king built the temple? Pata nahi. Because the goddess existed even before the kings. There were trading happening from prehistoric times in India. Log have been trading. We know trading has been... We know even pre-Harappa, 3000 year BC, we have got trade between India and Middle East. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan would travel down the Indus River through the Makran coast because of the Indus cities, and the lapis lazuli would go to Iran, Egypt, and has been even found in Cyprus. It only is found in Afghanistan, nowhere else. And if Harappa didn't exist, the cities of Gujarat, Dholavira, and all those places didn't exist, this blue stone would not reach Egypt. Now you'll ask, David, what has that got to do with mythology? It's only trade. Ask yourself, why did Egyptians need a blue stone from Afghanistan? It's because the gods in their temples wanted the best luxury goods that nobody else can have. So the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the gods have these blue and gold images. If you see that, the gods must have what nobody can have. So jitne dur se leke aao unke liye. We don't realize that it is these temples and the demand of these capricious gods who would say, humko lapis lazuli chahiye, which creates a trade route.
Yeah.
So the luxury demanding gods and pharaohs of Egypt, the pharaohs are gods on earth. The ziggurats in Mesopotamia have these, all of them want this blue stone, which comes from, no one knows where it comes from. Who are these traders getting it? And that belief कि भगवान को हमें ये नील पत्थर देना है, इसलिए the whole trading route has been created from Afghanistan via Indus Valley through the Indus cities along the Makran coast. That's what we, because हमें believe, there's a belief system which shapes infrastructure. The day the belief system dies, that whole thing collapses. And that is how the pyramids, I'll give you an example of the pyramids. Why were the pyramids built? Only one reason. Gods wanted to drink beer and eat bread. That's all. For thousands of years, the Egyptians lived on the bank of the river Nile. They knew farming, but they never farmed. Why? Because it's so easier. You have a big cattle, we use the word cattle, no other word. So if there is a cattle, you kill the cattle and you eat for 15 days. Kaam nahi karna padta hai. You just kill an animal and you eat it. Why do you have to do farming, harvesting, so much work? So for thousands of years, they lived in this river valley, happy. Then one day somebody spread the word ki no, gods are unhappy. God needs beer. God needs bread. Which means God needs wheat to be grown. Wheat has to be grown properly. So suddenly irrigation has to happen, fields have to be built, labor has to be mobilized. And all those who help God get beer and bread will also get bread and beer. So now suddenly assemblies of people are made, an assembly line is built, a factory is set up, factory to make the bread, make the beer. And what do people do to do it? What do you have to give the gods? Now God has to come down. No. So build a temple for him. Now, in the Egyptian thing, the temple was the body of the king. So the body of the king had to be placed in a beautiful place. They decided it should be a pyramid, which will take 20 years to build. So 20 years ke liye tumko khana milega. That's called long-term thinking.
It is very relevant today also.
Yeah? You build, and we have heard stories in India of kings when there would be a famine. They would say, during famine, we want to build a palace.
Yeah.
And they'll say every evening the king would come and remove all the bricks.
To rebuild it again.
So that it has to be built again and again and again. Because that structure, because he says it's very wrong to give people free food because वो भिखारी नहीं है. And वो ऋण में चले जाएंगे. ऋण. In India, ऋण is a very important word. Debt. Don't put people in debt. So give them, now they have to give service, sir. Give us some job. Okay, build this palace. And therefore, the king's job is to create opportunities.
It's public works.
It's public works.
Very relevant today.
So, and that whole thing. Yeah. So, I'll give you a story of Indradumna and a lake. And it's one of my favorite stories of public works. So, once upon a time, there was in heaven, Swarg. There is a king called Indradumna, and the Indra says, in the old Vedic, they believe that you can live in paradise, Swarga, as long as people on earth remember you. So you have to do such good work that the longer people remember you, the longer you can stay in the God's heavens. So Indradumna is told one day, Indra summons him and says, sorry, you can't stay in Swarga anymore. Nobody remembers you on earth anymore. At least we have not found anyone who remembers you, so you cannot stay in Swarga. Please go away. And Indra says, I have donated thousands and thousands of cows to people. And nobody remembers. He says, nobody remembers. Please go down. And he goes down, comes back to earth, and he realizes thousands of years have passed. His cities don't exist. His palaces don't exist. His people don't exist. Nobody remembers him. The people who took his cows don't remember him. Nothing. There's no memory of him. And he feels so sad. He says, nobody remembers me. He goes to the oldest man. The oldest man said, I don't remember you, but let's go to the oldest bird. And the oldest bird doesn't remember him. So they go to the oldest tree, and the oldest tree doesn't remember him. And finally they find an old turtle. And the old turtle says, I remember Indradumna because my great-grandfather, the turtle before me, had told us a story of a king who built a lake called, and this is where I was looking, and Indradumna says, a lake? I never built a lake. I gave cows. He says, yeah, you gave cows, but you see what happens when you give cows from your palace? They kick dust. Godhuli. You kick dust. Because you gave away 1,000 cows, so much of the dust was kicked that a depression formed in the ground. And when the rains came, it collected there and became a lake in which lots of animals grew, and one of them was my great-grandfather, the great turtle. And that's how we remember Indradumna. Not for the actions he did, but because those conscious actions have been forgotten. But the unconscious benefits of those conscious actions have been remembered. So तुमने गोदान किया, लेकिन उससे there was a lake created, एक तालाब बनी, which gave life. The cows have been forgotten, but the lake has been remembered, and you don't even remember building it. It was a byproduct of your charity. And Godan is a metaphor for livelihood. That's the Sanskrit metaphor for livelihood is Godan. I remember this priest telling कि मंदिर हमारी गाय है. Because if the temple doesn't exist, I don't have employment. And then pilgrims won't come. If pilgrims won't come, मैं खाऊंगा क्या? तो गाय है वो. That's when it struck to me, oh, it's a metaphor. And I think Indradumna's story, which comes from the Mahabharata, by the way, and it's not going to be shown on television serials.
So talking about water, you want to touch on the Saraswati River?
So the Saraswati River story is found in the Mahabharata. And, well, the really interesting story of Saraswati really comes only from the 13th and 14th century book called Saraswati Mahatmya, which comes from Gujarat. And they say that one day there was a rishi called Dadichi, and he had a son called Pippalad. And Pippalad was told that his father was killed by the Devas. The Devas have killed his father. So he gets very angry. He said, my father was killed by the Devas, I will kill all the Devas. And in his fury, he produces a ball of fire. And he sends it to the gods. And the gods are like, oh my God, is ball coming and going to destroy the heavens? So they go to the boy and say, what have you done? Why are you destroying heaven? Why are you destroying Swarga? Why are you destroying it? He says, you killed my father. You killed my father. He said, no, we didn't kill your father. We have weapons which you are fighting, and we had to hide those weapons. We gave it to your father in order to so it doesn't fall in the wrong hands. He pulverized it and he drank it and hid them in his bones. When we needed the bones back, we went to him and he told, take it, take my bones and make your weapons out of it. By the way, the Paramveer Chakra, behind the Paramveer Chakra, the symbol is of Dadichi's bones.
Oh.
So Paramveer Chakra, when you see, if you just flip it, there is this image said to be Dadichi's bones. Bones which are sacrificed to become weapons for the gods. So that's what it means, the Paramveer, therefore, the great Paramveer. So they are told that Dadichi was perhaps the first Paramveer. And Pippala says, oops, I'm so sorry, I misunderstood. Nobody gave me the news. Obviously, news agencies don't work anymore. So what do I do? So he says, इसे निकाल दो. They said, नहीं, ये नहीं होगा. एक बार जो तीर चली तो चली. तो उपाय बताओ. India is a land of Pagdandis and upay. So the rishis said, if you have created the problem, you have to come up with a solution. So the rishis said that the only way it can go is if it can be hidden under the sea. And say the god says, who will take it under the sea? So Saraswati says, I will, you know, my sister Ganga has already gone down to earth and everybody worships her. I will also go to earth carrying this ball of fire and put it under the sea and rescue, and I'll also become famous. And Deva says, are you sure? Because, you know, we already have missing her. She's gone. You will also go. Says, no, I'll go. She carries this ball of fire down. So while Ganga flows towards the eastern sea, she moves. You know, she wants to be independent and not be surpassed by her sister. So she goes towards the western sea. Only problem is it's fire. So she starts to evaporate. And she's just evaporating. And of course, the ball of fire reaches the sea and is right now under the sea. It's called Vadavagini. But the river Saraswati, unfortunately, dries up. And that's the Thar desert. So Saraswati river also came down from the heavens. So in fact, it is considered to be the inverted tree called the Palasha tree, which hangs upside down from the heavens, from where she came. And Balaram is supposed to have from Dwaraka moved towards the mountains along the river Saraswati. But he always wondered, why is she disappearing all the time? One of the reasons we believe that Rajasthan has the maximum groundwater. I don't know, Thar desert is a unique desert in the world. It's the most populated desert in the world because there's a lot of groundwater. So people have figured out these very clever water management systems to dig wells. And there's a beautiful book written by a lot of scholars about how water is managed in Rajasthan. It's one of the most unique phenomena in the world. These people, and they believe that Saraswati runs underground. And this is the river Saraswati. And this is the water management system which was there in Harappa. The Ghagar Hakra river is probably that river. We don't know. We don't know what the Harappans called it. We don't have their language. But there's a memory of a river, and this Thar desert region has this strong memory of the Saraswati river. And I think the rest is up to politicians to decide. But scholars know only this much.
So, talking now of Harappan, you want to talk about architecture?
इतना पैसा में इतना ही So sorry?
You're telling about Indra and Tata is. Remember the Indra.
He finished it.
I finished the story.
You finished the story.
It goes the Thar desert. The tortoise story is over. He goes, it's over. We figure it out, he's remembered, he goes back to heaven. I thought that was implied. So, once you're remembered, you can go back. Unfortunately, nobody is remembered forever, so they all come back. That's what happens. We all go. So, it's a very beautiful way of saying, how much are we remembered? We are not remembered for actions, we are remembered for the reactions of our actions. So, it's a philosophical take on things. Yeah, but you see, Harappa is something that I enjoy studying because It's a most mysterious civilization. We don't have the language, but it was a trading civilization. These were merchants. We always, whenever I learned history, I was always taught about kings, and who always loved fighting. So this battle, that battle, this battle, that battle. It's almost as if we are being told that history is created by raiders and killers and murderers, but we shall call them kings. But they seem to be all killing people. Ashoka is great because he slaughtered the people of Kalinga. I mean, really? Why are kings being celebrated for violence? And then you realize, in India we had a civilization long time ago, which very peculiarly, it's a big mystery. Nobody has understood it completely, and scholars are figuring it out. It doesn't have it has not a single image of war. It has no swords. They have not found a single sword. 700 years these cities survived. No sword. Not one sword. No image of war. No images of slaughter. How does a civilization which spread over 1 million square kilometers, 1,000 settlements, 700 years, survive without any large-scale war? Of course, there would be some war, something, but nothing dramatic. At the same time, exactly the trading partners who were buying lapis lazuli in Mesopotamia have these images of kings sitting on top of heads of human beings. You go to Egypt, you have these Namar stone, which talks about the northern and southern, lower and upper Egypt uniting with bloodshed. Horrifying images of kings killing. None of those images are there in Harappa. And I was very intrigued by these people. And I realized this was a city created by traders, not raiders. You see, raider takes things, but a trader gives and receives. So kings are always associated with the killing of the deer. But the trader would never kill the deer. He would say, where's the deer going? Maybe there is a settlement there. I can trade with them. I can exchange things with them. I can exchange, like lapis lazuli was taken from Afghanistan, something else came to India. What came to India? So trading, and Harappa was a trading city. All those things that we read about, in fact, those seals now are very clearly license permits, very clearly seen as an economic enablers. They are very clearly shown by scholars to be economic enablers. The cities were built with walls and gates, but not to defend from criminals, but to regulate the flow of raw materials and finished goods. And I think that is fascinating, that you have entire structures built, mathematical precisions. I'll give you an example of they have standardized weights across these places. Everybody knows if I move from one country to the other, I have an exchange rate. And the reason the European Union was created is so that you don't have to keep changing your currency when you cross each border. This idea was there in Harappa. They said, why should we fight? Let's have a standard rate of measurements and exchange. And I found that idea fascinating. And we don't know how they managed. There were no kings, there are no monuments. I don't need a monument to intimidate people. I don't need tombs to intimidate people. I don't need palaces. So even they didn't build palaces. They just focused on efficiency and effectiveness, which sounds very business-like. They have streets where only one cart can go in one direction, so that they can control the flow of goods.
Odd even with Asha.
Odd even tha. I just got it. You see, in Bombay, we don't have such problems. But the thing is, the main road did not have a door opening to the main road, because if there's a door opening, the truck or the cart will stop for loading and unloading and block the traffic. So all doors would open in the side roads, in the gullies, not in the main marg. Now, people designed this 4,500 years ago.
Why can't we do it now? I mean, what's the problem?
Well, it means that you don't have to have a military mindset, but a mercantile mindset. When your mindset is lena bhi padta hai, dena bhi padta hai. Only a merchant will think like that, ki dekho, lena padta hai, lekin dena bhi padta hai. This is trade, this is yajna. The Vedic word yajna means you have to do swaha, give, and you have to receive, tathastu. If you don't give and receive, the language of Hinduism and mythology is financial. It's always give and receive, give and receive. You cannot receive without giving. This is how the Harappans imagined the world. They're giving lapis lazuli, but they're saying, "Humko kya milega?" And you know what they would bring? One of the things they brought back was bitumen. Bitumen is tar, so that they could make those great bath of Mohenjo-daro and they love to take bath. Bathing platforms, they would have bitumen and tars for the road. So they were not bringing back jewelry. They were bringing back very practical stuff. It's a mystery. We really don't know what they imported. But one of the things they probably imported was bitumen, which is found in Iran, not found in India, which is practical. So they would give lapis lazuli, they would give cotton, of course. India was famous for cotton. But in the later periods of Indian history, what would we import? Horses for warfare. Ghode aate the on ships, and they would be paid in advance, because if the horse dies on the road, because it has to come by ship, they would cut their tails and give it to the king and say, "Look, I brought 100 horses, 20 survived. Here are the 80 tails of the animals which died." Why did you bring horses? Because military kings, yuddha karne ke liye. Military versus mercantile. The Buddhist and Jain the Buddhist monasteries were built along trade routes. Badrinath, Kedarnath, trade routes. The best temples in India are built along trade routes. Jahan vyapar hota hai, where I give and receive. That is what's the difference between culture and civilization. Is culture takes care of itself. People keep using the word Indian civilization. Civilization has to give and receive. Dena padta hai, lena padta hai. Then only becomes civilization from an archaeological point of view. An archaeologist will say, if only there is an import-export, we call it civilization. If you're only producing food for yourself, or you're plundering, extraction economy versus exchange economy. So I think the best infrastructure in India was created at a time when people genuinely believed in exchange. Dena padta hai, lena padta hai.
Shesha Suri, the Grand Trunk Road.
The Grand Trunk Road. That's a historical, but the idea, the belief. What is mythology? Mythology is the belief that I should die debt-free. If you believe that I should die debt-free, you'll be generous. Those who don't believe, why would they be generous? You are being rewarded for hoarding wealth. So you'll become Bakasur. Because तुमको सब लोग salami de rahe hain because aap bakasur ho. So mythology, look at the belief in bread and beer created the pyramids. Belief in lapis lazuli created the Bronze Age trading network. The Bronze Age trading network was created because of belief. The Vedic culture was all based on yajna. Dena padta hai, lena padta hai. The temples, why were the temples designed? To redistribute wealth. Redistribute. That is the purpose of a temple, is only one. Ki every year agriculture land say, "Itna food is coming, food is coming." What do you do with the food? You can hoard it. No. We have to create an ecosystem for artists, for musicians, for painters. So if you go to Puri Jagannath temple, it has painting. There were painters being patronized. There were musicians. There were dancers. There were monasteries. There were the Brahmins. There were the Devadasis. There were the villages providing for the ceremonies, the artists. All of that is being supported by the agricultural income that is being accrued by the temple. And the temple has the concept of Navadurga. Navadurga is the city is divided into 9 parts. You can just make a city and just do 2 lines this way. You'll get 9 blocks. Each of those had a Durga. Now, look at the story of Durga. How is she created in mythology? She's created because all the gods come together to create her. It means collaboration. You work together. Somebody gives this one, sab log deke, aur Devi ka murti banta hai. So it's an act of collaboration coming together. The temples were that. They were called these mandalas. So that there's a wealth redistribution system. The day this system broke, when one of the parties said, "I will figure out a clever way to hoard wealth. So I will not repay my debt. I'll just keep collecting and I'll trick you." And over time, the exchange system becomes exploitative. And the moment the exchange system becomes exploitative, the system collapses. Harappa collapsed like this. the temples collapse this way. When one king said, wo marg se nahi jayega, is marg se jayega, suddenly Khajuraho collapses. So we have to understand whether we create exchange ecosystems. In the purpose of infrastructure is to connect. कि आप हमारे यहाँ आओ. So when you see the oldest carvings of Ramayana in Pattadakkal in Karnataka, if I'm not mistaken, that's where this carving of Rama Pattabhishekam is there. They show Ram with the Vanar Sena, but they also show Vibhishan with the Rakshasas. Because now that the bridge is built, the Rakshasas can come. And now we can trade. Now the Aryavarta is connected with Kishikinda, is now connected with the Rakshasa Bhumi. And let's trade. You don't have to grab things. Rakshasas grab. You can exchange. And I think this is what these stories are trying to communicate. We spoke about Indraprasth being burnt. What we forget is that this Indraprasth, the Khandav-prasth is where the Nagas lived, the serpents lived. And they killed all the serpents. And the serpents came back for revenge. They said, you killed our ancestors. And then there is this great, they go and kill Parikshit. And then Parikshit fights, his son says, I will kill you and you will kill me. And they keep killing each other until the Mahabharata is told, saying that, you know what, that's not the way you create a society. So the Sarpa Satra, the killing of the serpents or the genocide of the serpents is happening by a king who feels that I am the victim. And Vyasa is telling me, you're not a victim. You are the villain. Your father was not killed by the serpents. Your ancestors killed the serpents. Don't make this simplistic, kaun victim hai, kaun villain hai. We are all victims, we are all villains. A king has to be gracious enough to create an ecosystem. जब मैं खाऊंगा और खिलाऊंगा, I will eat and I will feed. जो अन्न देता है, जो लेता है, अन्न, there's a restaurant here called Anna. Anna is what you eat, but your body is called Anna Kosha. The collection of food, because somebody else has to eat your food. Somebody has to eat you. Somebody has to eat you, otherwise what's the use of your body? And the last cooking of your body happens when you're cremated. We are all food. So this idea that, and that is what Vyasa is telling, that the Nagas are not your enemies. You have to work together. And therefore the infrastructure, the marg will connect. There is no stranger then. Then you are my neighbor. And in a world where neighbors are fighting each other, I think important that infrastructure creates exchange ecosystems where there is no Sarpa Satra, no slaughter of serpents.
So, we made you talk a hell of a lot, and it's okay, another.
Yeah.
So, till now there has been, in pure infrastructure jargon, we have focused a hell of a lot on transportation. I would move to the sector called energy. Now, with today's whole focus on solar and wind, even in casual conversation you were telling me that there are massive references to the sun and the wind. You want to talk about that?
See, energy is... So, what is the first hymn in the Rig Veda? The first hymn in the Rig Veda is directed to Agni. And through Agni you reach the gods. Without Agni you cannot reach the gods. What is Agni? Energy. If you don't have fire, in order to create a civilization, in order to, if you have a building nowadays, the first thing you'll check is there electricity, is there water supply? Right? That's what we chose. So in the old days, in the village, they'll say, Agni hai, pani hai. Two things. You need fire and water. In the old days, if they want to kick you out of the village, they'll say in Odia it's called Niya Pani Otak. Niya is fire. So fire will not be given to you, water will not be given to you. That's how you're kicked out of the village, of the community. Atak hota hai. Tumko pani ko hi nahi dega, tumhe agni ko hi nahi dega. So fire is how the story begins. That without fire, nothing will happen. And always there are three fires being built. So the idea of energy comes from this. One is water, create irrigation systems, ponds, but create ecosystem. In the old days, when we talk of energy and electricity today, it's industrial. So we talk of electricity, which is what, 300 years old? Before that, it was really talking about light, fire. How do you get fire? You will burn a forest. which means something has to burn, otherwise how will it, forest has to, the fire will consume. The fire is going to consume, it has to consume something. It is going to consume then ghee, oil, something. So India is the land of oil seeds. We produce a lot of oil. We produced a lot of milk and therefore ghee. So we had ghee, we had oil seeds. So in the old days, you extracted oil, vegetable oil, plant oil to create Agni. You cut trees and you have the Havan Kund. And we knew that if you do too much of Yajna, so there's a very famous story of which is told in the Raghuvamsha, where a tiger attacks a cow and the king comes and says, "Aap go hatya nahi kar sakte. You cannot kill the cow. I'm protecting the cow. I'm this great king. I have protected the cow." And he's Ram's ancestor, Dilip. And the cow looks at him and the lion says, "Acha theek hai. You have protected the cow. The cow is useful for you because you need its milk, you need its dung. So it's important for you, right? I'm a lion. What will I eat? What will I eat?" He says, "Go eat other animals." He says, "Am I mad to leave the forest and come to your pasture to kill because I know you have weapons? Clearly there is a problem in the forest. You have destroyed so many forests that there are not enough places for animals to like me to hunt. We are forced because you have built pasture land for your development." So there is an imbalance being created. Too many cows and therefore the lions are hungry. And they are coming into your land to eat your cows. Now, if you look at it from a metaphorical angle, they are talking about how infrastructure, whether it's energy infrastructure, whether it's water infrastructure, whether it's transport infrastructure, doesn't come from a vacuum. It comes from consumption of nature. When you consume something from nature, what do we give back to nature? The Europeans created an industrial revolution where they polluted nature, because in the biblical structure, God said humans are the masters of earth, of all animals and plants. They were kept at the apex. But that's not the ideas in China and India. But we have forgotten that this extraction of energy, what do we give back? We're talking about clean energy. But are we thinking in terms of exchange? Otherwise, we'll repeat the same mistakes that the Europeans are doing. Europeans have always created an extractive culture, not an exchange culture. We come from, at least theoretically, from an exchange culture. So when we have to ask ourselves, if I'm extracting, let's say, clean energy, is it really clean? What are the consequences? And if we start thinking like that, I think we'll come up with fabulous solutions. And I think that is an important thing. वो अग्नि के लिए वो जो लकड़ी होती है, we have to ask ourselves कि वो लकड़ी जब पेड़ से जलता है पेड़ से, then Agni is consuming it. If I burn all the forest, that's what kind of prosperity, they just burnt everything. So we have to ask those foundational questions. When does it, I'll just give an aside about fire, because fire is the only equivalent I have to energy of a South Indian temple, of how they would think. They would say, if you donate a lamp to the temple, you have to give X amount of cows and Y amount of goats. You will say, why? They'll say, see, lamp तो दे दिया तुमने, उसमें तेल कौन डालेगा? उसके लिए गाय चाहिए, ghee, because it's a temple, you can only use ghee. Say, oh, very good, I'll give you 20 cows. But why goats? You're saying, for the cows, who is going to take care of the cows? There has to be a cow herd. Who will feed the cow herd? Give him goats. Now that's called sustainable economy. No?
Yeah, certainly.
And this is inscriptions in Tamil temple walls. It's there, it's carved on the temple walls. That if you give a lamp, and the temple's vaibhav, the wealth would be how many lamps are burned. Even today in South India is very famous, the temples, they have lamps on the walls on certain days. Hundreds and thousands of lamps to show how rich we are. Like, hamare itne gaay hai, so one lamp means so many, so you do your math. How many cows, how many goats, how many cow herds being sustained. So it's not a measure of the rich of the temple. The temple is saying, I have merchants who can donate this. But I also have so many cowherds who are sustained by this. All this is part of an ecological conversation. Are we having ecological conversations? This is what our scriptures teach us.
Wonderful. So you have obviously stirred a lot of thoughts. So I am actually going to use whatever balance time we have, which is up to you.
Yeah.
because I mean, some people may be in a hurry to leave, but others may still be inquisitive. So I'm actually going to throw it open to the audience, if that's all right.
Yeah,
with
yeah,
you.
please do.
No, just, I mean, we've had a great, there's a lady's hand up. Please feel free to ask Devdutt anything you want.
We've seen that mythology and infrastructure and city building have all come together, and it's something that has somehow stirred the whole country one way or the other.
Yes.
Sir, if there's something, do you have any thought on this, given that you are an expert on this subject? And I don't want a political discourse, I'm not looking for that. Your views are yours, mine are mine.
Yeah.
But then still, sir, I would like, given that you are an expert, I would really appreciate, anything that you would want to sort of enlighten us with.
I think it's important to remember this lovely city of Dwarka under the earth, under the sea, no? It's very famous. We never ask that even when God creates cities, it goes underwater. Right? जब भगवान भी नगर बनाते हैं, उसका पतन होता है. There is a time when even the city that he establishes will go. In his own lifetime, उन्होंने नगर, there was no Dwarka before. His people needed a home. He moved from Mathura and he created this lovely city called, and there are beautiful Jain stories of how the city was built. Beautiful story of flying cities and donkeys braying and all, but for that you'll have called me for another session. But that's from the Jain scriptures, the Jain Harivamsha, not from the Mahabharata and Hindu versions. But the fact is, this city is built, and then we are told the city, Sri Krishna with his own eyes watches the sea consuming it and how the waters enter, and he can do nothing about it. The Mahabharatas, this is from the Musala Parva, and it's Krishna's watching the city that he built going under the sea. He's doing nothing to stop it. The helplessness of God is being shown. We have mythologies where God sends floods to destroy cities. When you read the Bible, when you read the Quran, there is this fire, brimstone, floods to destroy the earth sent by gods. Hindu mythology talks of a God who witnesses his own city being wiped away by a flood because so it is decreed. And he doesn't try to stop it. He watches it. He witnesses it. Sakshi Bhav. He watches his children die, his grandchildren die, the submergence of the city. He's watching it happening. Dwarka goes under the sea. And I think there's a lesson there for those who want to see it.
So you could say something about that lesson?
No.
That's not infrastructure.
नहीं, उसका दक्षिणा फिर आपके पास उतना थम्स नहीं है ना. ऋण में रहोगे आप, फिर ऋण में तो फिर उद्धार कैसे करूंगा आपका, नहीं कर पाऊंगा.
Is there time for another question?
Yeah.
So, as a child, we had gone to the Golconda Fort at Hyderabad, and, of course, they always show you how they clap at one end, and you can hear it at the other end, and it was very fascinating. And then, as one visited monuments over the years, one realized the ancient architectural knowledge created an ambience, an atmosphere for you.
Yes.
Whereas translate that into the architecture now, it's just, rectangles and squares and no impact almost. And I just wonder, has this ancient technology got lost? After all, the physics principles are the same.
So we have to be careful, while we can romanticize the past, those structures that we're talking about were built by kings for kings. They had the money and the power to build those structures. None of the structures, they're very expensive structures. Extremely expensive structures. Today, in the old days, if a king was feeling hot in this summer, he would have 20 slaves doing chamar. Today, we all, if we have some money, can buy an air conditioner. We all can have a fan. So, in a way, certain privileges that once existed with a small elite group has reached a larger, but it comes at a cost. It will not be those beautiful buildings. Unfortunately, it will be the ugly structures, because the efficient, it's like what happens perhaps in Harappa. Why did they not invest money in aesthetics? Alankar nahi hai. The irritating thing about, if you go to Rakhi Gadi, which is not far away from Delhi, you go to any of this thing, it is boring. lines and lines of bricks, no art, nothing. It's boring. It's really, you go there and you're like, really, I paid money for this? It's like a kilometer of bricks. Who wants to see? You can go to any juggi jhopadi anywhere and see it, and there's more color and light. So the thing is, these old structures, while they are romanticized, they were like in Mayan temples. If you go to South America, there are Mayan temples which do the same effect. You clap and it'll make the sound of a serpent, it'll make the sound of a bird. But they were built by very rich kings who had a lot of money, who had access to mobilized forces, who had slaves to do it, who had kings to do it, architects to do it, and they could build it. Today, good, bad nahi bol sakte, but the technology today is accessible to so many of us. It's not, the Golconda Fort was not accessible to everyone. Today we go as tourists. But think about that period of time. Who would have access to that? And why was it built? It was built to protect the hoard and treasures of a sultan or a raja or a maharaja, uske dhanadhanya sampatti ke liye banaya gaya tha. So while I love these structures and enjoy these structures, it also is important to remember that these were built by a tiny 1% elite class. And somewhere we have to Janakalyana, because Raj Dharma in its finest form is where, as I said, everyone has to be fed. That is the purpose of kingship and the purpose of greatness in India. Ki khana khana hai aur khilana hai. This whole yajna, the word I always use, the heart of Indian thought, the heart, if at all somebody says Hinduism in one word, yajna, aur kuch nahi hai. So I don't think these people enabled, they're beautiful structures and I really loved it and I really admire them. I wonder why this was not taught to everyone. The knowledge was kept within a community, a caste. Today everybody can go online, check the data and understand physics, chemistry, biology, math. I can go to anywhere, it's all freely available, fairly okay. Quite impressive. We may not go there, that's different, but it's far more accessible. Pehle zamane mein, it's a very famous thing, Ustad Chela ko sab kuch nahi sikhayega. कहीं तू उस्ताद बन गया तो ना, तो नॉलेज मैनेजमेंट सिस्टम ऐसे बनता था. नॉलेज मैनेजमेंट सिस्टम को बांध के रखते थे. वन ऑफ द फाउंडेशंस ऑफ जाति सिस्टम्स इज दैट जुलाहा जो अपना ज्ञान अपने घर तक ही सीमित रखेगा, वो किसी और को नहीं सिखाएगा, हलवाई को नहीं सिखाएगा, जुलाहा को ही सिखाएगा. Because his weave is what gets him the market, gets him the benefits in the market. So his family tree is maintained. This family makes this weave. So they will never share that secret with anyone. That's a traditional model of knowledge, which is the patent. Aajkal hum patent bolte hain usko. Capitalists are allowed to do it, but this is an old model of knowledge control. I don't think the Harappans would go to Iran and say, oh, it's available in Afghanistan, you can go there. They would never say where the blue stone is coming from. So I think this is something we have to keep in mind. I don't like to romanticize the past. I appreciate the past, but I don't romanticize the past. Life changes. Things change. New technology has come. It comes with its own problems. When I was a child, talking about infrastructure in Bombay, the first flyover was built and we were told once this flyover is built, all traffic problems will come to an end. That was 40 years ago.
That's even true today.
So now the coastal road, I'm like, nonsense. 40 saal pehle mera dil toota tha. My heart broke 40 years ago. Well, let's see.
Anything else? Otherwise, we'll slowly. Okay, there's a question there. We'll slowly wind down the evening session.
Maybe one or two more.
We can take one or two more questions. Please.
One question and one observation. You mentioned about Vijayanagar, fairly recent civilization. I think one of the aspects that they used stone to make their palaces and all the structure is availability of local resources. That is something that we need to inculcate in our infrastructure and housing, vernacular architecture, etc. That's one observation. And second thing, you alluded to this. Rivers have been an integral part of Hinduism, devotion, culture, and civilization. At the same time, we see every river in India is polluted. But we still see a score of people going to rivers, doing pujas and everything. So you can see the conflict there, right? At the same time, we are doing pujas and etc., but we are still polluting. So what do you think are the lessons that we can learn from mythology to change that perspective?
See, the rituals of worship rivers have been happening in India for 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. And this may have come from prehistoric times. So over time, you have iterated the practice and figured out when to go, where to do. So you have given this, when you say the ritual that they perform, it emerged over several centuries. How old is industrialization? 200 years old. So for thousands and thousands of years, people worshipped images made of river clay. They would take a clay, they would do a puja, they would put organic. Suddenly one day somebody said, the statue can be made using plaster of Paris. They don't know, they're full. Suddenly an industrial product comes which doesn't deteriorate. But the person doesn't understand it. We have not had enough time at the speed at which things are going. Suddenly 200 years ago, somebody created a technology that I can take aeroplanes, ships, steam engine came and the monsoons were no longer important. River currents were not important. I could take goods from one place to the other. Railways emerged. This is what the British brought to the table. They brought in new technology and we absorbed it. We loved it. And even today we say we industrialized economy. But industrialized economy is also a polluting economy. We never call it polluting economy. We say industrialized economy. Developed, industrialized nation, not polluting nation. You never see the consequence. Karma nahi padhate hai na. Europeans, there is no concept of karma. So we are paying the karma. No? So you have these fluffy rivers called Yamuna in Delhi, which nobody understands and they're doing Chhat Puja in the middle of it. The Chhat Puja has been done for thousands of years. This pollution is a few generations, then barely for. So they are like, how do I reconcile the two? Why should I stop a practice which has been happening for 30 generations and 40 generations with the pollution which happened 3-4 generations ago, and I don't know how to cope with it. We are facing that problem because now we are being told AI will solve all problems. It's the new Jesus. AI is the new Jesus. It's going to solve everything. And we all know it's bollocks. किसको, I mean, हिंदी में बॉम्बे में बहुत अच्छी शब्द है उसके लिए, लेकिन I can't use it in India habitat center. That's what they're saying, and we know it. So we don't think in terms of the holistic narrative. That's the job of the Rajadharma. This large thinking. We don't have that vision. Even Indradumna didn't see what he was doing. All he knew was giving away cows. But the larger narrative. So we don't see this larger narrative. And I think this is what vision is all about. Strategy kya hai? Strategy is Garuda Drishti. To see far, far away. Tactics is Sarpa Drishti. Today's, aaj ka khana, aaj ka election, aaj ka quarter. Everything today, today, today. But who thinks 100 years from today, 200? Because none of us will be alive. None of us will be alive 200 years later, 100, 50 years later. So we are thinking, I want to have my gold coins and TRP ratings today. But even Krishna is saying, you know, your sister, Dwarka bhi nahi bachi thi, meri zindagi mein maine dekha jate hue. I saw it fall. It's very important. All these stories were written like that. They were written they were reminding kings. These stories were told in front of kings, right? Janmajaya is being told the story. Your ancestors built the city of Indraprasth. And Krishna built Dwarka, but Krishna watched Dwarka go away. Why is the story being told to kings? See, don't be so vicious because he's killing the serpents. Calm down. And that's why I think when we talk about pollution, I think we are a little ungenerous too. We don't know how to cope with pollution. And why should, it's like saying we'll save the environment by not using straws. That's fooling ourselves. Plastic straws mat use karo. Fir desh ko bachaoge, dunya ko bachaoge. Aise thodi na hota hai. None of those industries will stop. Everybody comes to Davos in a private jet.
Yeah, on that happy note, and your very strong thing that the essence of Hinduism is yagga, taking and giving exchange. Some very, very powerful thoughts. So on behalf of the audience, I think we owe Devdutt an inspiring evening that... Thank you. In our daily lives, you just open up the windows to think a little differently, and that is as great a service as you can do. So thank you very much.
2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes. Come, sit.
So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. And I'm sure by the end of this evening, you all realize that infrastructure is not all technical, boring, dry stuff. Is that right? So that's exactly the reason why we conceptualized InfraKatha series, because we wanted everyone to realize infrastructure is all around us. We connect with infrastructure, but we can relate to it very differently
through stories such as we heard today. So on this first InfraKatha session today, I think, thank you, Dr. Pattanaik. You really had us all mesmerized listening to you.